Have you ever wondered what it would be like to hear God's voice clearly, as if he was speaking directly to you? Imagine, for just a moment, how your life could be different if you could recognize his guidance in every situation, in every challenge, and in every decision you make. Picture how much more peace, clarity, and purpose you would experience on a daily basis. Today, we're going to unveil the mysteries of understanding God's voice and how you can harness its power to bring about radical transformation in your reality. This isn't just about listening. It's about learning to interpret his messages in a way that aligns with your personal journey. And trust me, this revelation can change the way you see everything in your life. Stay with me until the end, because the insights we're about to uncover might just be the key to unlocking the change you've been seeking. God's voice doesn't always come as an audible sound, like we often imagine. It's not always a dramatic moment, a booming declaration from the heavens. Instead, God's voice manifests in various, often subtle ways. Through a gentle intuition, a Bible verse that suddenly stands out, or even through a seemingly ordinary event in your daily life. But the real question is, are you paying attention? Too often, we get caught up in the busyness of life, overwhelmed by distractions, and we miss the quiet moments where God is trying to speak to us. His voice can be found in the silence, in moments of reflection, and sometimes even in the middle of life's chaos, but only if we are intentional about listening. The truth is, God is always communicating. It's us who need to tune in. Let's look at the story of Elijah. In 1 Kings 19, Elijah was expecting God to show up in a grand display of power, in a mighty wind, an earthquake, or a fire. But God didn't come in any of those ways. Instead, he appeared in a still, small voice, a whisper. This story teaches us something profound. God's voice isn't always loud or dramatic. More often than not, it's subtle, and if we're not attuned to it, we'll miss it. But why does God choose to speak this way? Perhaps it's because he wants us to be still, to quiet our minds and hearts, so that we can truly hear him. In a world that is always demanding more noise, more action, more speed, God's voice invites us to slow down, to reflect, and to seek him in the stillness. That still, small voice is always there, waiting for you to listen. So, how do you know when God is speaking to you? And more importantly, how do you interpret his voice in a way that makes sense for your life? The first step is alignment. Aligning your heart, your mind, and your spirit with God's will. The more you seek him through prayer, meditation, and reading his word, the more familiar his voice becomes to you. Think of it like tuning into a radio station. The signal is always there, but unless you're on the right frequency, you won't hear the music. God's voice works the same way. The more time you spend in his presence, the more attuned you become to recognizing his voice. Even in the midst of life's noise, you start to notice his guidance in places you once overlooked, in conversations, in the moments of silence, or in the stirring of your spirit when something resonates deeply within you. But here's where it gets practical. God's voice often aligns with your current reality. He uses your life, your challenges, your triumphs, and even your failures to communicate his will. The key is to ask yourself, what is God trying to teach me in this moment? How can this experience bring me closer to him? It's about seeing your life as a canvas for divine messages. Nothing is random. Every situation, every person you encounter, every success, and every setback is an opportunity for God to speak into your life. But we have to be willing to ask the right questions and reflect on the deeper meaning behind our experiences. When we begin to see life this way, we start to recognize the subtle ways God is directing us. Let's dive a little deeper. Sometimes, God's voice doesn't give us what we want to hear. It gives us what we need. And this is where we face a challenge. There are times when God's message calls us to patience, to endure difficult seasons, or even to change the direction of our lives. This brings to mind the story of Jonah. Jonah was called by God to go to Nineveh, a place he didn't want to go. In fact, he resisted the call, running in the opposite direction. But God's voice persisted, not to punish Jonah, but to align him with a greater purpose. You, too, might be resisting what God is telling you right now. Maybe it's because his message challenges your comfort zone, or maybe you're afraid of the unknown. But here's the truth. God's voice always guides us toward growth, transformation, and ultimately, a life that reflects his glory. It may not always be the easiest path, but it is always the most fulfilling one. And once you hear God's voice, the next step is crucial: action. Listening without acting is like receiving a treasure map, but never setting out to find the treasure. The Bible is filled with stories of people who not only heard God's voice, but took bold steps in response to it. Think of Abraham, who was called to leave everything behind: his homeland, his family, his comfort, because God had a promise for him. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was one that led to the fulfillment of God's greater plan for his life. Moses, too, heard God's voice and, despite his fears and feelings of inadequacy, led the Israelites out of Egypt. These are stories of obedience, stories that remind us that hearing God's voice is only the beginning. It's the first step in a journey of faith that requires us to take bold action, even when the path ahead is unclear. Your reality will never change unless you act on what God is telling you. So I challenge you to ask yourself, what is God asking me to do today? What step of faith is he calling me to take? Is there something in your life that you know God is nudging you toward? Or maybe he's calling you to let go of something that's been holding you back. Whatever it is, remember that obedience to God's voice always leads to breakthrough. The more you trust his guidance, the more you will see his hand at work in every area of your life. As we come to the close of this journey, remember that God's voice is a powerful tool for transformation. It's not distant and it's not unreachable. It's woven into the very fabric of your everyday life, waiting for you to tune in. By learning to hear, understand, and apply his voice, you can unlock a deeper level of purpose and breakthrough in your life. But it all starts with a willingness to listen and to act. Don't ignore the still, small voice. Instead, embrace it and let it guide you into the divine transformation that awaits you. If you enjoyed this video, you definitely don't want to miss the previous ones where we talked more about how to hear God's voice and understand his signs in your life. Be sure to check them out for even more insights on connecting with the divine